lot of time when I get asked about broadband, particularly in relationship to farming and agriculture, is what sort of special and specific applications do farmers expect or use broadband for? And actually the best response is not a whole bunch. I mean, farmers and rural small businesses really are looking at broadband opportunities the way that other small businesses are across the rest of the country. At first, we're seeing adoption instances related to enhanced communication, able to download something, not having to wait for something to come up. That seems to be why people sort of like it to start with. But as we're starting to see more of the application as it really can affect, the agricultural community, what we're seeing is it's not necessarily the direct application to how it's going to help your farm, but the indirect application to all of the infrastructure and service providers that help you farm, where the broadband is really going to having a lot of direct impact. Healthcare, public safety, schools, private vendors or contractors who have to sell you something or provide you an ancillary service. All of these types of things, with their access to high-speed broadband and services and technologies available through the web, make them more efficient to be able to serve the farming and rural communities. For example, technologies that help older farmers stay active and involved are extremely important. So technologies that we can apply to help those people who are basically healthy but yet have some health problems maintain active, overall are going to be beneficial to us as a society, because the more people can stay active in something like agriculture, the less likely we're going to have more catastrophic healthcare costs related to them. I think some of the future benefits that we're looking at related to broadband relates to more integration between the infrastructure of third-party provider of services that work in rural areas, both public and private, and getting them more involved in broadband applications. Also related to risk management on farms is that a lot of our agricultural sector has been behind a lot of the manufacturing sector in adopting things like just-in-time management technologies, in part because a lot of our products are perishable and they are also vulnerable to deterioration, either natural or through some sort of terrorist attack. So as we see headlines about contaminated food or something like that, our ability to go right down into and have monitoring technology that broadly lets us see what's going on, both on a supply management and on a safety management issue, is going to have ways of revolutionary changing the way that we provide food in our country. Also, manufacturers of major farm equipment like tractors and combines are coming out with smarter and smarter material, but it's all smart related to right now within the context of what you can sort of feed into the brain of the computer that operates, say, a combine that might operate on its own. With the operation of broadband, with the ability to sort of have the machine itself that's doing the laborious labor actually connected to the internet, then you have the ability to actually have a smart machine. For example, if you have a very heavy piece of machinery working on a field and there's a rainstorm coming up, right now the machine doesn't know it. But if you have a way for that machine to sort of communicate back and forth with weather reports, which are available over the internet, then the machine knows, aha, here comes a rainstorm, the ground's going to get soggy, which means the seeds that I'm planting won't take very well, and my big wheels will start tearing up the field and I'll damage the resource here. So I'll stop and wait for the rainstorm to pass. And the machine would automatically know that, as opposed to other applications. So we are seeing that these types of applications are looking to be on the drawing board and be applied in farming and rural communities. But I think the most important way, as I said originally, that we're seeing it applied right now, particularly in agriculture and in rural small businesses, is the opportunity that broadband gives us to do more direct connection with our customers. More people are becoming more interested in related to issues of participating in agricultural production because they can get better feedback from the people they're selling to. What do you want? How do you want it? What can I do to add value for you? Do you have a religious preference that I can, in my production practices that will make this a more valuable product to you? Are there sort of social or cultural practices that can help you? Before, we had to sort of rely on indirect means to communicate these types of messages back and forth. Now we can do them practically directly and almost on a sort of on a per-person basis. I think also the other part of this question is not just what we're seeing the use of broadband in rural and farming communities, but what's going to happen if we don't? What are the kind of situations we're going to see in rural communities if we don't have access to high-speed broadband technologies? And I think what we're going to see is continued reliance in a lot of rural communities on low-skill manufacturing and service sector jobs. These are the jobs that are getting hammered by globalization, by the trade agreements. These are the jobs that we're losing and that we're getting the backlash against, sort of the expanded integration with the world economy. And if we don't have access to the communications technologies, then we're going to continue to have an over-reliance on those things in our communities. We're going to continue to have unacceptably high incidents of worker injury and death related to traditional rural industries such as farming, mining, and timber. I think what the examples we had of miners being able to sort of do some preventive things, these are extremely high and dangerous occupations. We aren't going to be able to attract people to want to devote their careers to that if we don't have ways to be able to mitigate the risks that are in those occupations. We're going to continue to see underinvestment by rural communities in high-skill education opportunities. Why? Because we're going to continue to see outmigration of locally generated knowledge, skills, and experiences. The kids are going to leave. The people who are smart enough are going to leave. And the people who are capable of adding value to rural communities aren't going to stay. So that means that we're going to see a continued over-reliance of rural communities on either government transfer payments or other mechanisms of wealth transfer, attraction as a community economic driver. We're going to have, without broadband, we're going to have community development officials sitting around going, how can we attract rich people to come to our community with trust funds so that they'll spend their money here as opposed to New York or Washington or something like that. And over time, those are going to be extremely detrimental to a balanced kind of economic growth in those communities. What are some of the challenges that we're facing in underserved areas other than sort of specifically knowing where and where not the technologies currently exist? Well, again, I think the obvious one is the geographic isolation and low population density of the communities that we serve. I think things we'd like to talk about is what do we think we can accomplish from sort of mapping and programs such as those that are Connect Kentucky and Connected Nation are moving forward. I think in the views of our members and the feedback that we've gotten, we get to identify critical issues, critical areas. We are making the debate about what and where and how to accomplish what we want to accomplish related to broadband application, more about facts rather than perceptions in the debate. We're moving away, even though we have a lot of stories about success here, we need to get away from just anecdotal evidence. We need to actually have a broader fact set in order to make the right decisions, I think. Also, we're more likely to have an increased community-based approach to decision-making related to implementation and just knowing the facts doesn't mean that the decisions are made. There's still going to be some tough decisions that are made, and as much as possible, we think that the mapping programs will probably help facilitate community-based decision-making or participation in that decision-making to a far broader degree than we've seen so far. And finally, increased integration of rural communities into the social and cultural trends of the 21st century is going to be critical. People aren't going to want to farm in places where they're just not part of the global village. Traditionally, in rural communities, we looked at the isolation as sort of a fact of life. You had to be isolated, so you had sort of islands of sort of rural social and cultural communities out there. And in some aspects, we sort of thought, well, this is really offsets the fact that we're far away from the rest of the world. The fact is, most of the people, at least in our dealings and the people who participate in grange meetings, is that they want to be part of the rest of the world. Isolation is not a badge of honor. It's something you kind of had to put up with and you grew up with related to the limits of the technologies that were available. But if the technologies are available, we really would like to have the same aspect and the same access to communication technologies as everybody else does. Because, frankly, we are really part of one big global village.